Have the, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Winston-Salem Urban Area Technical Coordinating Committee meeting. And if you give me just a second, due to the Safe at Home order issued by Governor Cooper, members of the Winston-Salem Urban Area Technical Coordinating Committee are participating virtually. All members will vote by a roll call, and each member will be recognized, at which time the member will state his or her vote. And we're going to ask Kelly Garvin to please take the roll for us.
Ma'am. Kelly Bennett.
Here.
Carrie Gentry.
Here.
Tanique.
Here.
Suzette. Well, just for purposes, she's
Here.
a board member. Yeah. Daryl.
Here.
Fred.
Here.
I'm here. Kirk.
I'm here.
Lee Rollins.
Here.
Stacy.
Here.
Megan.
Here.
Scott Leonard.
Here.
And Scott Ryan.
Present.
These are all the folks that I saw before we started. Did anybody else trickle in while we were doing the roll call right before?
Donna Woodson joined.
And
Thank
Scott Snow.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. At this time, is there anyone that signed in to join us for a public comment?
None that I saw.
All right, very well. Before we get started, there were a couple of introductions I did want to make. Let's see, we have a new transportation project planner for transit joining us. His name is Matthew Dushan. I hope I'm saying that right. He's trained me a couple of times, and I think I'm still saying it wrong. Dushan. Thank you, Matthew. And then we have our intern with us, Mr. Jordan Toney. And then hey Jordan, and then we also have with us a new recording secretary, Laura Nixon.
Hello.
So if you will all join us with welcoming her. And is there anyone else that's new? Scrolling through. Okay. Thank you all for indulging me. So we will get into our agenda. And our first action item will be the consideration of the July 15th TCC meeting minutes, which are enclosed. Did anyone have any comments for the minutes, or would anyone like to consider making a motion to accept the minutes as they are?
Scott Snow, make a motion approval.
Lee Rollins, second.
All right, thank you both. So it has been moved and seconded that we accept the meeting minutes. Kelly, can you call the vote, please, call the roll for the vote?
Yes, ma'am. Kelly Bennett.
Yes.
Carrie Gentry.
Yes.
Tanique.
Yes.
Suzette. I'm sorry, Suzette does not vote. Apologize. Daryl.
Yes.
Fred.
Yes.
I vote yes. Kirk,
Yes.
Lee Rollins,
Yes.
Stacy Talbert,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Scott Snell,
Yes.
Scott Leonard,
Yes.
Scott Ryan,
Yes.
and Donna.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, we will move to our next item, which is the consideration of a resolution and appointing an interim secretary for the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO. This item has to do with the restructuring of our Winston-Salem's Planning and Development Services Department and our Department of Transportation's role on the with our TAC secretary. In the past, the staff member from our Winston-Salem Planning and Development Services Department has served as our Transportation Advisory Committee secretary. And because of the changes that are going on in their department, it has been recommended that we have someone in our department assume that role. However, our MOU states that a staff member from our planning department would serve in that role. Because we know that our MOU will change at some time, and we've all been through the process of what it takes to have our MOU change, we thought that we could bring an item as a resolution of consideration for the TCC and the TAC. And at the time that we change our MOU, once we have final data with the census, we would make that update to make it a permanent change. So we're asking this committee and the TAC to allow us to have staff from our Department of Transportation serve in the role as our interim Transportation Advisory Committee secretary. The person that would serve in that role would be Kelly Garvin, and we allowed her to go ahead and start off this meeting so that she can get some experience with that before Kirk has to assume his other roles and is no longer available to us, should both committees accept that as we've recommended. Are there any questions? Would anyone like to make a motion in support of the recommendation?
This is Kirk. I'd like to make a motion in support.
Thank you, Kurt.
Stacy Talbert, second.
Thank you, Stacy. So it has been properly moved and seconded that we would allow a DOT staff member to serve as our Transportation Advisory Secretary. Kelly, can you call the roll for the vote, please?
Kelly Bennett,
Yes.
Gary Gentry,
Yes.
Danique,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Fred Hayes.
Yes.
I vote yes. Kirk voted
Yes.
Lee Rollins,
Yes.
Stacy, did you vote yes, I think? Seconded?
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Scott Snow,
Yes.
Scott Leonard,
Yes.
Scott Ryan,
Yes.
and Donna.
Yes.
Thank you all so much for that. And Kirk, we would really like to thank you for the time that you've served in that role and all that you've been doing for us and all that you continue to do for us to help with this transition.
Well, thank you, Tanique, and committee members. I appreciate all the positive feedback, and I will continue to be a voting member, just not a secretary of this organization. Thank you.
All right. We will move on to our next action item, which is consideration of amendments to the fiscal year 2021 through 2022 Unified Planning Work Program for the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO. And I guess Kelly's going to cover that for us.
Yes, ma'am. The item before you is the consideration of amendments to the fiscal year 2021-2022 UPWP for the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO. As we all know, all MPOs that have been designated as transportation management areas with urbanized population of over 200,000 are required to develop an annual Unified Planning Work Program, UPWP, in coordination with Federal Transit Administration. Each year, the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO is required to develop and approve its UPWP. And this document identifies what transportation and transit projects and work tasks will be completed during the fiscal year and the estimated amount of federal, state highway, and transit planning funds that will be used to complete the work. We adopted our current UPWP, the fiscal year 2020-2022, 2021-2022 UPWP on March 18th of 2021. However, there has been some recommended changes and updates to the UPWP. The city of Winston-Salem is requesting that their WISTA route study be moved from fiscal year 2020-2021 to the current fiscal year, which is 2021-2022. Due to some administrative delays, they were unable to begin the project before the end of the fiscal year, as well as the Village of Clemens, who is now requesting that the scope of their bicycle and pedestrian study be reduced to only a pedestrian study. The total cost is set to remain at $50,000, and the city and the village would still be responsible for the $10,000 match on this project. Per our public participation policy, this document was advertised for 30 days, and we have not received any comments. This item is up for action. I've included in your packet the amended UPWP. I'm here to answer any questions.
All right. Does anyone have any questions for Kelly? Would anyone like to make a motion?
Make that motion. Scott Ryan, move for approval.
Thank you, Scott. Would anyone like to second that motion, please?
Donna Woodson, second.
All right, thank you, Donna. So it has been moved and seconded. Kelly, can you please call the roll for the vote?
Yes, ma'am. Kelly Bennett,
Yes.
Carrie Gentry,
Yes.
Danique,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Fred Haight.
Yes. Yes.
I vote yes.
I vote yes.
Kirk,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Stacy,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Scott Snow,
Yes.
Scott Leonard,
Yes.
Scott Ryan voted yes, and so did Donna Woodson.
Very good, thank you. All right, we will move on to item number 5, which is a review of an amendment to the Long Branch Trail. An amendment to add the Long Branch Trail to the 2045 MTP for the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO. And that will be Byron, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. The 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or MTP, is a long-range multimodal, physically constrained planning document that identifies the needs, funding, and direction of our transportation network over the next 25 years. This document is complemented by the Comprehensive Transportation Plan, or the CTP, which is not required to be physically constrained, but does include transportation projects identified as important to our community. The MTP, just as the MTIP, is amended as needed when new projects are added or existing projects are modified. Changes such as the movement of projects across horizon years, funding, or project scope modifications all impact the MTIP and the MTP and the MTIP counterpart. The Long Branch Trail extension in our CTP is WS-RDW-046, is included as a project in the CTP, and staff would like to amend the MTP with this project. As required by the public participation policy, this amendment was made available to the public from July 21st to August 23rd, 2021. No comments were received during that time. I'll be happy to answer any questions about this item.
All right, does anyone have questions for Byron? Would anyone like to make a motion on this item?
Lee Rollins move for approval.
Thank you, Lee. Is there a second?
Scott
This is
Reimer.
Kirk. I'll make a second.
Thank you, Kirk. We're a quiet group today. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Kelly, can you please call the roll for the vote?
Yes, ma'am. Kelly Bennett,
Yes.
Carrie Gentry,
Yes.
Tanique,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Fred Hay.
Yes.
I vote yes. Kirk voted yes. And Lee voted yes. Stacy,
Stacy?
Yes.
Megan,
Megan?
Megan,
Yes.
Scott Snow,
Yes.
Scott Leonard,
Yes.
Scott Ryan,
Yes.
and Donna.
Yes.
Kelly, this is Chris. I can hear y'all now, so I can vote.
Okay, I got you.
Okay, I got you.
And yes, my vote.
Thank you.
All right. Is that everyone, Kelly? Okay, thank you. All right, we've got one more action item, and that is the consideration of amendments to the fiscal year 2022 federal congestion mitigation and air quality projects for the Winston-Salem urban area MPO. Kelly?
Yes, ma'am. The item before you is the consideration of an amendment to the 2022 CMAQ project recommendation. So Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality, CMAQ, is a federal program that funds the transportation projects and programs in air quality and attainment and maintenance area to help achieve and maintain national standards for air quality pollutants. In North Carolina, the North Carolina Department of Transportation serves as the administrator for this program. The NCDOT announced the release of federal CMAQ fund to the MPO for fiscal year 2022. Earlier in, I guess towards the beginning of this year, the funds were eligible to be programmed for projects for fiscal year 2022, which runs from October 1st of 2021 through September 30th of 2022. I'm not sure if that's the version that you have in your packet, so I wanted to make that correction. The fiscal year for fiscal year 2022 is October 1st, 2021 through September 30th of 2022. So NCDOT did allocate $1,794,000 approximately to the MPO for fiscal year 2022. Two candidate projects were submitted for funding consideration, and both were approved by the TAC on April 15th of 2021. Following the review process with NCDOT as they were reviewing our application, they made some corrections and made some adjustments to our application, and we are therefore coming back to seek approval of the TCC and the TAC of the changes that were made based on those discussions. Included in your packet is the table that reflects the changes that were made. Basically, NCDOT requested that we match the Saturdays and Sunday night services amount that was requested in the past 2 years, because that is a requirement for that program. So this item is up for consideration. We did not bring it first for information because we had already voted on this item and that we are not upping the amount that we were awarded. We're just moving the funds around. So it's the same amount, it's just moving around from one project to the next. I'm available for any questions.
Sorry, I was on mute. Are there any questions for Kelly? Would anyone like to make a motion?
Ryan will make that motion.
Anybody? Is everyone on mute?
Scott Snow, second.
Scott, are you going to make the motion? No one made a motion for approval.
Yes, I'll make the motion.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear you. All right. Donna made the motion and Scott seconded. Thank you. All right. Kelly, can you call the roll for the vote, please?
Yes, ma'am. Kelly Bennett,
Yes.
Carrie Gentry,
Yes.
Tanique,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Fred,
Yes.
I vote yes. Kirk,
Yes.
Lee Rollins,
Yes.
Chris, Chris Jensen, Stacy,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
I heard Scott Snow say yes, so Scott Leonard,
Yes.
and I also heard you, Scott Ryan, so and Donna also said yes. So that's all.
All right. Our next two items are information items for future action. Item number 7, review of the fiscal year 2020 through 2029 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program amendments and modifications for the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO. Byron?
Good afternoon again. The 2020-2029 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, or MTIP, is a listing of all the projects programmed for the Winston-Salem urban area. This document is a subset of the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan and reflects projects programming in the state's Transportation Improvement Program, or STIP. NCDOT regularly updates the STIP to include new projects and to modify existing ones. This could be done for reasons such as funding, municipal requests, or schedule changes. Statewide projects are projects which are located in our planning area. As their schedules, funding, and programming is modified, these changes are reflected in our MTIP. Including your materials are project modifications, additions, and deletions, including statewide and local program modifications for 5310 funding, NCDOT statewide traffic operations and clean energy technology initiatives, and parts operating and capital funding. These amendments were made available for the public for 30 days from August 30th to September 12th per our public participation policy. No comments were received during that time. This item will be up for action at our November meeting. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions about this item.
Very good. Does anyone have questions for Byron? All right, hearing none, we will move on to our next item, which is a review of the letter of support for the workshop of Davidson and Life Center of Davidson County for NCDOT Federal Transit Administration Section 5310 funding. Kelly?
Yes, ma'am. So as mentioned, the item before you is the review of letter of support by this MPO for Davidson County Department of Senior Services, Workshop of Davidson, and Life Center of Davidson County for North Carolina Department of Transportation's FTA's Section 5310 funding. The North Carolina Department of Transportation, the Public Transportation Division, administers the application and selection process for the allocation of FTA Section 5310 funds. Those are enhanced mobility for seniors and individuals with disability funding program in rural areas. The Section 53 program provides funding to improve mobility for seniors and individuals with disability by removing barriers to transportation services and expanding the transportation mobility options. The workshop of Davidson Life Center of Davidson County and Davidson County Department of Senior Services provide services within our MPO uh, for disabled persons and individuals 65 years and older. But only the service provided in our MPO in our urbanized area are eligible for funding through the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO. For areas that are determined to be outside of our urbanized area, these providers can apply for funding through the state's Section 5310 funding program. This letter of support acknowledges that the Workshop of Davidson Life Center of Davidson County and Davidson County Department of Services, Senior Services desires to participate in the state's competitive selection process for services provided outside of the MPO's urbanized area, and that the Transportation Advisory Committee supports these agencies to apply for the 5310 funds. The Workshop of Davidson has requested $104,000. Life Center has requested $60,000, and the Davidson County Department of Senior Services has requested $250,000 from the state 5310 program. Included in your packet is the letters of support for your review. This item is just information at this meeting, so we will bring it back. We will bring it back in November for action.
All right, does anyone have questions for Kelly? Very good. All right, we have another information item, which is not going to require further action. The first will be review of fiscal year 2023 federal congestion mitigation and air quality projects for the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO. I guess that's Kelly. I'm reading that wrong.
No, you're reading it correctly.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So the item before you, again, it's like she mentioned, it's another CMAQ item. This is concerning funds for fiscal year 2023. Earlier this year, about a month and a half ago, we issued a call for projects for CMAQ projects for fiscal year 2023. NCDOT announced the release of those funds to be available for our MPO, and these funds would be eligible for program projects in fiscal year 2023, which runs from October 1st of 2022 through September 30th of 2023. NCDOT has allocated about $1,794,000 to the Winston Urban Area MPO. The call for project ran from August 2nd of 2021 to September 1st of 2021, and we received 2 applications that are currently being evaluated by the Office of Environmental Assistance and Protection. We will provide those results at our next meeting with our recommendations for funding. I've included in your packet all the information concerning the call and the eligibility of projects and the schedule.
All right. Any questions for Kelly? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to item number 10, which is Prioritization 6.0 NCDOT update.
Yes.
Kelly, yeah, I'm sorry. Kelly, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. That will be me. And right after me, I will also give the floor to Fred Haith to talk a little bit about how this process also affects our upcoming STEP. Due to concerns over the rising cost of transportation projects in the current state Transportation Improvement Program, or STIP. The prioritization workshop decided on July 19th to recommend to the Board of Transportation that the next prioritization cycle be halted at this time. That's P 6.0. These increases are due to the low initial cost estimates of projects, as well as a rise in right-of-way, utilities, and construction costs. The Strategic Prioritization Office shared this recommendation with the Board of Transportation on August 4th of 2021, and the board members concurred. What the next steps are, SPOT still intends to release the scores for P 6.0 projects, and they're still working on releasing those scores. P6 data will be preserved and may be used as a basis for Prioritization 7.0 when that process begins. TAC and TCC members and alternates will be kept informed of the process as things evolve. I've also included in this letter the memo that came directly from NCDOT for your review. And if you have any questions, I can try to answer them. Or if I do not know the answer, I will find out from them. Before I hand it over to Fred, does anybody have any question about this? All right, so I'll let Fred take over and talk about the presentation on the STIP update.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, next slide, please. This is a presentation that has been shared with the Board of Transportation. Today, we will review the project development process and how a project's cost can increase substantially over time, doubling or sometimes tripling from first inception to award, and background on last year's reprogramming exercise. Additionally, there are several process improvements currently underway at the department that we will discuss and give you a STIP programming update that is a result of those process improvements, showing you where we stand to date and the challenges we face in adopting the next STIP. As a quick reminder, our last STIP was adopted in September of 2019 and spans the 10-year period of 2020 through 2029. The information we will be covering today is regarding the development of the next STIP, which is the 2024 through 2033 STIP. Next slide, please. One more slide, please. All right. As I mentioned, and I'm sure you're aware, project estimates can have a substantial cost increase over time. Oftentimes, this is due to projects having low initial cost estimates due to limited knowledge of the project details at the early state when the project is scored in prioritization and then programmed in the STIP. You can see some of the more common reasons here, like not having surveys, traffic forecasts or designs, early design assumptions, and the rising cost of right-of-way and construction. But these are certainly not the only reasons. Sometimes the right-of-way and utility impacts are known early on, and it's not until we get further into the project development phase that those needs become more fully defined. Additionally, if a project is brand new, it's basically just an identified need when it first gets scored. A cost estimation tool is used in SPOT in order to establish a cost for scoring the project. This tool is based on GIS data and relies heavily on user input, so it ends up being more of a generic cost estimate since it doesn't take into account more project-specific details since they're unknown. Next slide, please. As I'm sure most of you remember, the department went through a reprogramming exercise in the summer of 2020. The need for that came from the multitude of project cost increases we received between September 2019 to June 2020. That, along with reduced revenues and cash issues at the time, resulted in the need to reprogram because we were no longer fiscally constrained. In order to go through that process, we became more aware that we really need to improve the accuracy of NCDOT's cost estimation practices, which will ultimately lead to improved stability of project schedules in the STIP. So there are multiple efforts underway that we will review right now. Next slide, please. The Cost Estimation Improvement Process Committee was comprised of various DOT staff from several different business units that deal with cost estimates. You can see here the major findings, which we've discussed today: low initial estimates due to limited knowledge at early stages and lack of a central data repository for estimates, which can lead to multiple estimates for the same project. With their findings, they determined the goal was for DOT to have an ingrained process for updating estimates for all the various phases on DOT projects throughout the department. The goal is to ensure estimates are being updated on a regular basis and shared with everyone who needs them. And of course, creating a central data repository will help with efficiency and organization. Next slide, please. So in order to accomplish these goals set by the committee, there are several key activities underway that you can see listed here. First, while the cost estimation tool has been continuously improved with each prioritization round, we now focus our efforts on express designs for each project. This helps provide a better cost estimate early on due to having more information to better quantify our needs. Second, we're ensuring that all cost estimates are being updated every 2 years at a minimum and getting a refreshed right-of-way and construction estimate as right-of-way is about to begin or the project is about to be let. Additionally, we have a research project underway with our partners at NC State to develop contingency values for both right-of-way and utilities, and also confirm the appropriate contingency values for construction at the various stages of project development. Lastly, one of the most important initiatives is value engineering studies and value assessments. Value engineering is a federally required program for large federal projects over a certain cost threshold. However, the department has always taken the stance that value engineering is beneficial to more than just required projects. For required and requested projects, the prescribed 7-step FHWA value engineering process will continue. To assist in cost containment, the department has implemented value assessments, which is very similar to value engineering, but has more flexibility. Our most recent effort was rolled out as a phased approach this past spring. The first 2 phases are complete, and phase 3 is well underway, with several projects in each division being studied for cost containment measures, and those recommendations are being evaluated for incorporation into the projects. The 4th phase has just started to study projects scheduled for let over the next 4 years. Moving forward, value engineering and value assessments will be institutionalized as part of the project development process. Next slide, please. Typically, cost estimates are updated throughout the life of the project, and the STIP would be updated periodically. And then we would adjust as necessary for fiscal constraint prior to putting out a new STIP. But with the scale of the issue, we decided it would be better to get all the outdated estimates refreshed at once so we would know the extent of the issue and have time to address it appropriately in order to incorporate it into the development of the next STIP. We identified over 450 projects with over 1,000 estimates that needed updating. Our division staff, central project managers, and technical units have been working on this effort to refresh estimates and have done an outstanding job. In fact, we have one of those individuals in this meeting, Mr. Philip Craver. Next slide, please. Based on the numbers that are coming from the updated cost estimate exercise, as well as just our normal cost estimates that come through the typical project development process, these are the projections for each of the 22 funding buckets for the next STIP cycle for both committed and non-committed projects. What we're showing here is where we stand for each of these funding buckets. We're allowed to overprogram by 10% in the 10-year period. These numbers already take into account that overprogrammed amount. So each one of these funding buckets are beyond that allowable amount by the amount shown in the programming status column. So while these numbers are substantial, the problem is not imminent. It's not a today, next week, or next month problem. There's still time to address the issue. Also, this picture is going to change. In fact, many of you have probably already seen a slightly different version of this slide. The numbers are changing all the time. So just absorb this slide for the content or the message, and not so much the numbers themselves, because they have changed and they will continue to change. And that's actually a good thing. So they will change, hopefully, for the better. Next slide, please. We also wanted to show the picture. Thank you. We also wanted to show the picture of each of the funding buckets if the non-committed projects were removed. Non-committed projects receive funding in the STIP, but they must recompete for fund for future rounds of prioritization. So similar, just exactly what Kelly mentioned, these are the projects that are going to move forward and compete in the next round of prioritization. Next slide, please. The first item we discussed with the board was inflation. In the STIP, we account for inflation by reducing the available revenue to program projects. The amount is evaluated at the start of each new STIP development process to determine the appropriate amount. Based on the economic condition at the time of the 2020-2029 STIP was being developed, inflation was set at 1% compounded annually over time, with it being held steady at year 5 of the STIP. This equates to approximately $1 billion over the life of the 10-year program. Department staff will be working with the board to determine how to handle inflation on future STIP programs. One thing to note is that increasing the amount of assumed inflation will decrease the amount of available funding for projects in each of the 22 funding buckets. Next slide, please. And lastly, this is a brief overview of the prioritization work group. We thought it would be very beneficial to see the individuals and the groups who come together to help make each round of prioritization the best round it can possibly be. That concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Fred, Kelly, thank you. That was a lot of information. Does anyone have any questions for Fred or Kelly?
Or Philip.
Oh, or Philip. Philip was quiet, so.
Well, I'm typically quiet, but I had to read, so.
Are there any questions?
Fred, this is Matthew Burchak. I was wondering about if there was a similar analysis done for bicycle and pedestrian projects, specifically locally administered bike and pedestrian projects. I know the amounts aren't nearly as high, but relative to the amounts of those projects, I'm curious about estimation errors with those projects as well.
Philip and I were discussing that very matter today prior to the meeting. Matthew, we're going to have to do some investigating and get back to you on that one.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I do have one quick question. On one of the slides, you showed that Division 13 and 14 had about $1 billion over funding. Do you know what projects that was contributed to?
No, and remember what I said, that the numbers that you see they're no
Check.
longer valid. It's a moving target. Once again, moving towards the better, towards the good. Let me find out what the latest numbers are, and yes, we can tie them to specific projects if you're interested in specifically which projects equated to those figures.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to our staff reports. Thanks. Again, Fred, Philip, Kelly. Okay, so staff reports, we will start with NCDOT Division 9, Transportation Projects Update. And Fred, I'm going to assume you're handling that for Pat.
I'll try, but oh, there we go. The spreadsheet is fairly self-explanatory. I will point out, though, that the project administrator has been updated for each project for the most part. In days past or meetings past, the unit head was listed, but we've now inserted the specific project manager for each project. So if you have any questions or concerns, they're listed. If you have difficulty in reaching them, you can reach out to me, you can reach out to Philip, and we will get your concerns addressed.
Very good. All right, any questions for Fred? We will then move on to the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO Transportation Project Update. Kelly?
Yes, ma'am, nothing beyond what's currently in your packet. I will be sending out, as I mentioned at our last meeting, you will be receiving, if you have not this meeting, you will next request for updates on your projects. I have not really seen a lot of movement. I'm hoping everybody is moving okay. And as always, if you need anything, if you need me to help mediate or coordinate between you and the division or somebody at the local management project management office, I'm available to help.
All right, very good. Any questions for Kelly? Okay, NCDOT Transportation Planning Update. Darrell?
Sorry, no update this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Darrell. Okay. Does anyone have questions for Darrell? All right. Piedmont Triad Regional Council of Governments update. Don't think Carter is here. Forsyth County OEAP Air Quality update. Carrie?
I have nothing beyond what's in the report.
Very good. Any questions for Carrie? All right. Bicycle and Pedestrian Facilities Project update. Matthew?
Sneak, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Any questions for Matthew? Okay. Winston-Salem Transit Authority update. Donna?
Good afternoon. I do not have any additional information outside of your report.
All right. Any questions for Donna? All right. Piedmont Authority for Regional Transportation Part. Scott?
Yes, ma'am. I do have a few items to share and update for the group. Outside of what's already in your packets, a few program-related activities that are ongoing or that are coming up a little bit more that'll come back to the MPO. Let me start with model-related activities. Piedmont Triad Regional Model. We have a great deal of activity and work in progress being made with our member agencies and city planning departments GIS with regards to community viz. That's an item that we've presented and talked about before with regards to how we're going to be managing SE data as it ties into the travel demand model. So kudos and outreach of appreciation for all those that have been involved because there's been a great deal of progress with that community viz data and managing that data. So that is ongoing, still showing progress. We're not complete, but it's certainly stepping in the right direction. We have our tour-based model activity with regards to freight surveying. This is what we had started with prior to COVID, and then we ran into some response issues from the freight carriers. That is actually kicking back up, meaning that we're going to be moving forward with our phase 3 of that tour-based model for freight. So that is progress and moving forward. The consultants are getting that project moving forward. And then we also have household survey work that is going to be going out for solicitation here, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. We have project ready to release, but there are some items needing to be finalized with regards to funding agreement between NCDOT and the City of Greensboro. All these items are tied in with UPWP, our Piedmont Tri-Regional Regional Model Work Program. So a lot of activities going on with regards to travel demand model. On the transit side with regards to Park Express, we had a public hearing this month with the Park Board of Trustees. Items to share, we put out for public hearing, and we are eliminating our Route 5 Amtrak connector service that we've had in place since 2006. We've been looking at and dealing with a great deal of loss of ridership, as well as some funding participation that we've had from NCDOT Rail Division for a number of years. What that essentially means is that direct route that was going from High Point to Winston-Salem, meeting up with Amtrak, we are actually converting our funds that we have locally and expanding our routes on Route 1, 2, and 3 during the week, as well as on Saturdays. So the connections to both High Point and Greensboro Amtrak rail stations are going to be covered, and they're going to be on a more frequent service with our main routes 1, 2, and 3, which is Greensboro, High Point, Winston-Salem Express, our quote-unquote bread and butter with our Park Express service connecting our urban centers. So that was an item that came up this month. Wanted to pass that along because the new services that we're looking at expanding to make those connections with Amtrak will go into effect on October 9th. Other item that I wanted to share is the work that's been going on with transportation demand management. Again, a lot of participation and kudos for our member agencies that have helped develop our Triad TDM plan. This is an item that we will be coming back to the MPO with regards to presentations of our initiatives, what we have this year, what we have for upcoming years, and what that basically means for all of our communities and member agencies with PART as it relates to transportation demand management. And that is the broad perspective from the definition of what that means. So that involves, certainly could involve elements that Matthew deals with bike and ped, as well as planning department with regards to sidewalks, as well as transit, as well as van pooling, carpooling, and things of that nature. So there's a great deal of involvement and movement as we're all really just trying to revitalize and recoup for what mobility has been impacted as it relates to COVID. And not to say that we are past that, but we are definitely revitalizing on how we can generate mobility options a little bit broader for the new workforce and the new norm that we're all still trying to learn what that actually will be. So with that, Madam Chair, I know that was quite a bit, but I wanted to really give an update of a lot of activities. I'll be more than happy to answer questions.
Well, Scott, thank you. We appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions on anything that Scott has shared with us? All right, hearing none. Thanks again, Scott. We will move on. Davidson County Transportation, Richard.
Hello.
Great.
Yeah, we didn't have a report this month, and I'm sorry about that. And I'll answer any questions about our operations. We're experiencing one of those COVID issues here. I got several employees out, so I'm shorthanded. We're running wild.
Yeah, I think that we're all experiencing some of that, unfortunately, Richard.
Yep.
But we're glad you're here with us today.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Richard? All right. Title VI compliance update, Marlene.
Thank you, Tanique. There's no update at this moment or time.
All right. Thank you. Any questions for Marlene? All right. MPO calendar of activities, Byron.
Nothing to add at this time.
Okay. Any questions for Byron? And ethics liaison. We've still got Kirk listed, but I guess Kelly, are you going to cover that?
Yes, ma'am. There's nothing at this time. Everybody's in compliance.
Very good. All right. Our next meeting is scheduled for November 18th.
Oh, this is Suzette. I need to do an update for federal highways, if you don't mind.
I do not mind at all, Suzette. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No problem. Okay. So I have two updates for you. So the first is about the census. So as you know, not too long ago, there was a Federal Register notice for the new definitions for what rural and urban areas will be. And with that, then comes new designations of TMAs or even redoing the areas for a TMA or an MPO in general. So what was supposed to happen was that in the spring, the notice came out in 2021, and then in the summer of 2021, this year, the census group would then review all the comments that they received and then make a determination for, if they're going to keep the criteria that they decided on or if they're going to change certain things about it. So, and that was supposed to come out, that was supposed to come out in the summer, at the end of the summer after their review. However, they received a lot more comments than they anticipated. So that's going to move down to January of, end of January is when they'll make they'll publish their new final urban rural criteria, urban rural definition. So that means that certain other deadlines are also going to be pushed back as well. So let's see. And also based on the census definition was when FTA and FHWA was going to make updates to theirs if needed. And so generally that would have been done around the fall of next year. So we'll just have to see when that will take place. That's just going to be pushed back as well. And also, if we followed the original schedule, states were to revisit their allocation of planning funds, as well as adding any new MPOs. That was supposed to happen in October of next year, but that may be pushed back as well. One thing that I did want to mention, if what they have as a definition remains, one thing that could be a potential impact is the functional classification. So the functional classification, there's 7 urban and 7 rural classifications, and the threshold would change for what's urban from 5,000 to 10,000. And that means that routes that are considered minor collectors, those actually do not receive, they're not part of the federal aid program. So it could mean that there are more routes that may be designated as minor collectors because that population change has increased from 5,000 to 10,000. But if that's the case, that a route gets redesignated as such to a rural minor collector, then that's something that would be discussed at that time of what to do. But that's, of course, if this the criteria that was originally proposed remains as is. So we'll see what happens at the end of January when the final register comes out. So a last update I wanted to give is that Federal Highways is conducting their, it's not biennial or their quadrennial report or assessment for MPO. It's an MPO freight assessment. So it's done every 4 years, and this is that year. Last year was the state, and so this year is now the MPOs. And so for all the MPOs within North Carolina, we're going through and seeing what they're doing for freight planning. And so then we find out what types of assistance the MPOs need to get maybe their freight planning in a way that they would like it to, but are unable to right now, or also best practices. So what are some things that the MPOs that are doing that we can spread out to other MPOs? And so I'll be doing that with Winston at the end of this month, and I've already done it with 3 of the other MPOs in the triad, and with the help of Scott at PART. So that was really great too. And at the end of it all, Federal Highways comes up with a report, and that report is sent out, and everyone just gets to see what some of those best practices are, and what maybe some commonalities are for technical assistance or resources that MPOs need. So that is it for me. Are there any questions for me?
Does anyone have any questions for Suzette? I don't hear any, Suzette. Thank you very much. That's a good update.
Thank you.
It's like some huge changes may be coming forward. All right, was there anyone else? Hearing none, would anyone like to make a motion that we adjourn?
I'll make that motion. Scott Ryan.
That is moved, and is there a second?
Second, this is Gary Gentry.
Moved and seconded. We are adjourned by consent. Thank you very much, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you at our TAC meeting. Stay safe.